Today we're checking out some of the most painful cave deaths of all time.
Starting with Sturk Fontine Cave Incident. It was September 29th, 1984. A cave explorer named Nuno Gomes was exploring unmapped sections of the Sturk Fontine Cave in South Africa.
Don't
he was
do that.
accompanied by his two friends, Peter Verhulsel and Malcolm, and together they planned to lay a guideline from the entrance to the farthest point of the wet cave area known as Milner Hall. The plan was for Nuno to go in and place the guideline, while Peter and Malcolm waited outside, assisting him from the surface. Nuno plunged into the water and successfully laid the line, covering a distance of 396 feet from the entrance to the end. Happy because of the success, the three decided to go back in and follow the new guideline.
That is an entire football
field. Once they reached the air
field.
pocket at the end, they were satisfied that they had successfully mapped this cave section. So they turned around and began to head out, following the line.
So what happened?
As Nuno led the group, he suddenly felt Malcolm touch him. Malcolm was signaling that Peter was no longer behind them. Nuno went back to see where Peter had gone and noticed that he had entered a side tunnel. Nuno tapped Peter to get his attention and signaled him to return to the guideline and exit the cave. As they headed back, however, Peter disappeared again. This time, Nuno and Malcolm assumed
Playing hide and
he had taken
seek.
the other exit, avoiding the tight squeeze they themselves used, so they did not go back to look for him. When Nuno and Malcolm surfaced and realized Peter was not there and still hadn't come out after a while, they submerged once more to look for him. They searched along the guideline and even in the side tunnels, but there was no sign of him. After 4 long hours, they ran out of air tanks, and the stirred-up silt reduced visibility to almost nothing. Finally, late that afternoon, they exited the cave and called for help.
At that point, what would you guys do?
Exactly what they're doing now. I would call for help.
What is the fire department gonna do?
Come down with more air?
I guess, maybe. That's probably one of the scariest things, to get stuck in an underwater cave and you have scuba gear with a time limit.
Yeah, well, going caving is scary enough. Like, I've heard stories of people that just get stuck in little crevices in caves, but if you add a water element to it, that makes it 10 times scarier. Especially because, well, you have the scuba stuff on your back too, and that takes up a lot of space, and you can easily get stuck just from all the equipment on your back, which obviously you can't let go of, because if you let go of that, you can't breathe anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll never understand why people willingly go into not only just a dark area, but a dark area that's underground. And not only that, a dark area that is underground and also underwater. Those are 3 no-nos.
There's a chance that he's still alive, though. He could have found the water pocket and it's just like, or an air pocket, sorry, and is just like chilling in the air pocket waiting to be saved. You never know.
Read the title, Alex.
No, he's definitely dead.
But lacking cave diving expertise, had to wait for the police divers to continue the search in the evening. The silt was so stirred up that visibility was heavily impaired. The police called off the search for the night, convinced they would now be searching for a body rather than a survivor. What no one realized was that Peter was not dead at all. He had been sidetracked by a secondary tunnel.
Why is he going inside tunnels?
3D structure, combined with the lack of a guideline, the stirred up silt, and the darkness, made it nearly impossible for him to orient himself. After trying many possible paths, Peter found a small room and decided to wait there for rescue.
That's terrifying.
He shone his light into the water in hopes of signaling his friends, but when no one came for a long time, he switched it off to conserve the little battery life remaining. He tried making noise by banging his tank on the rocks, but to no avail.
He's stuck.
Eventually,
He's
he
literally
became exhausted, fell asleep, and lost track of time. After that first night of searching, the police closed off the cave so no one else could enter. Unfortunately, the silt took a long time to settle, so visibility remained poor. Convinced Peter had not survived, the police decided to wait a full week
No way!
He's got to starve by now, right?
He spent his last weeks scared underground and he can't get out and it's pitch black and he thinks people are coming for him when they're not.
Well, you could survive a week. It depends how fat he is, how long he can survive. And if maybe that water is drinkable.
Maybe.
He can survive a lot longer if it's drinkable.
October 6th,
Read the
7
title
days
out.
after Peter's disappearance, they returned but found no sign of him. Another week passed before they tried again, but he was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Peter was still alive. He had spent 14 days in complete darkness, starving and having lost much of his weight. Hoping for a way out, he decided to follow a passage leading from the small room where he had sheltered. After traveling 120 feet away from the water, he discovered it was only a dead end, so he returned to a spot near the water to wait once more for rescuers. The police continued weekend searches for 6 weeks, but they never found him and finally called off the search with no result. At that point, they reopened the dry sections of the cave, but kept the water section closed. Volunteers then began looking for a connection between the dry and wet cave systems, and Nuno joined them. His contributions were crucial. He was the one who discovered the connection where they could enter the wet section of the cave. It was there that they found a set of footprints leading to a dead end, and soon after, Peter's body. Beside his body was a message that read, "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." It was later discovered that one diver had come really close to finding him as he entered an opening that was just 100 feet away from Peter's location.
No way.
100 feet's still far.
I mean, they were so close, though, considering how big this cave system was.
At that point, if he was banging, maybe he would have heard him.
This is like the saddest story ever. That's awful.
Yeah, caves are dangerous.
They're psychos. Everyone's psycho.
He died of starvation after 3 weeks in the cave. Although we may criticize Peter's decision to explore on his own, we should also respect the fact that he fought to survive until the very end. Crooked Swamp Incident.
All right, next up, Crooked Swamp Incident. Please don't be as bad as that one.
27th, 1982, and Donald Weltner, along with his 2 sons, Christopher and Roger, were about to lead a group of 12 Boy Scouts on a day of cave exploration. This wasn't Donald's first time caving, and even though the passages in the Crooked Swamp cave system were notoriously narrow, he wasn't too concerned. Donald was bigger than the other participants, so if he could get through, the rest of the group could too.
That's a good point.
At 2 o'clock, they entered the cave through its 16 by 28-inch entrance and stopped in a
That is so tiny.
I am not making it through that. There's no way.
Immediately, I am turning around and going on my couch, and I'm turning on Netflix.
Even if you guys like won the championship, and then your coach is like, "Come in this cave with me, Jack."
Cave explorers are like, they'll see a sign at the top of a cave that says, "Do not go in, you will die," and they'll be like, "Oh, this is gonna be an awesome Saturday."
It's like the crazy people that climb Mount Everest.
Yeah, I wonder like what they get out of it. I guess it's like adrenaline rushes.
It's the thrill.
Because yeah, it's like they almost die going in, and the fact that they get out is just like an overwhelming experience, I guess.
It's like Lewis and Clark, you know, they're exploring new areas that have never been seen before, maybe.
The bite is not worth the chew.
He was on the eastern side and noticed several smaller tunnels leading from the room. However, because they weren't sure which passages would be too narrow, Donald decided to check one. It involved a tight squeeze, but appeared to open to another section. So
that is insane.
The squeeze measured 18 by 20 inches.
No!
So tight that he couldn't
They realize they don't have to do this, right?
Lift his head to see ahead. He was followed by his sons. And
this
while
is not
moving
fun!
forward, thanks to the mud, making the terrain slippery, he reported back to them what was happening.
Everything
seemed normal until something unexpected occurred. As he pulled himself along, he realized the ground below him was disappearing. Donald slipped down into a tight crevice, and the slick mud prevented him from stopping his slide. His hands were trapped, leaving him no leverage to pull himself up.
He's
making
dead.
matters worse, the
Sure, his
path
kids can
angled
pull him
about
up, though.
30 degrees, so he had to fight against gravity. The crevice was just 5 inches wide, and the slippery mud caused his body to settle more and more. He told his sons to pull on his feet, but after several failed attempts, he told them to get the other adult in the cave, Jim. After a while, Jim also realized they wouldn't be able to free Donald on their own.
No.
Donald explained that some rocks had loosened when he slid and were now wedging against his body. Each time they tried to pull him backward, the loose rocks would slide forward and block the passage.
He was stuck.
Even the animation is making me skeeved out, but imagine in real life, he's stuck, and it's pitch black, and you can't even move your hands or your body or anything, and you're just getting slowly crushed by earth.
Not only that, but like, I feel like after a couple of attempts of failing, that's when mentally you're like slowly realizing like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Like I'm stuck here for days and that I'm just gonna rot. That's gotta be the worst feeling ever. Just like that realization of that you're stuck in a cave and there's nothing you can do to get out.
If you're in a tunnel, right, and you're squirming around like a worm on a Tuesday, you're already too far in. I hate to break it to you, maybe you're having a blast down there just being a worm, but you are going to die, all right? This is a PSA. Do not do that.
That's I can't believe they don't get him out.
Specialists and the police arrived, and because only one person could squeeze into that narrow space at a time, they tried using ropes to free Donald. This didn't work either, so they brought in tools to try breaking some of the rocks. However, given how tight the space was, hours of work led to only small breakthroughs, and Donald's situation grew worse. He was thirsty, hungry, and in a very cold environment, so hypothermia was a major concern. The cavers considered entering from the other side to give Donald food and water, but they found that the passage leading to where he laid was extremely narrow. Only two very small cavers, sisters Lynn and Nancy Taylor, were able to fit, but even then, they couldn't reach Donald's head. This meant there was no way of delivering supplies, so rescuers had to act quickly. They decided to dig from above ground, down to where Donald was stuck.
That's dangerous.
How deep do you think that was?
20, maybe 30.
It looks like they missed.
It does look like they completely missed.
Well, they're trying to get to the other side so that they can feed him.
No, maybe they're like digging straight down so that they can dig over later. Like once they get to the level, because I guess if they dug straight down, they'd put a drill in his body. So I mean,
at least they're ending it quickly that way.
And they don't want the earth to move and then squish him even more.
Yeah, dang, this is reminding me of Minecraft.
The process lasted all day Sunday, getting them close to the required depth. Unfortunately, though, they were about 12 feet away from Donald's position, so they needed to dig laterally. Meanwhile, Donald began giving only grunting responses, which indicated he was likely suffering from hypothermia. On Monday morning, as 2 days passed from when he got stuck, the digging continued, but the team encountered another problem: extremely hard bedrock layers that were impossible to dig through. At this point, they weren't sure if Donald was still alive, so they sent a nurse into the cave with a handheld Doppler machine to see if he still had a pulse. She couldn't detect one, but this wasn't definitive proof of death, since she only had access to his very cold legs. Sometimes, the body's core organs can continue functioning after the extremities have stopped registering a pulse. Seeing how quickly Donald's condition was deteriorating, rescuers started using their most extreme tools, including dynamite, which was extremely risky, but appeared to be the only option left. On Tuesday morning, they finally managed to reach his location, and a doctor was sent in immediately, but as many feared, Donald had died. It took an entire day to retrieve his body, and an autopsy later confirmed he had succumbed to hypothermia sometime between Sunday night and Monday morning. Following his death, the cave system was restricted to limited access. Agent Allwedd in—
This is—
Alec!
This is awful. Whose idea was it to watch this? This is gonna make me sad. I might cry.
I'm never going into a cave ever again.
Moral of the story, of all these, do not go in a cave. Do this test before you go into any cave.
Guys, I'm not leaving my house.
If you think about it, like, the whole world is a cave.
Adam is so dumb.
Roger Solari and Martin Farr, aged 26 and 23 respectively, wanted to map out the Agent Allwedd cave system in South Wales.
Of course you did.
John Parker, another explorer, had abandoned the mission after discovering a third sump in one of its longest passages. Martin and Roger, however, wanted to keep going to see what lay beyond. The first trip was done by Martin alone, because Roger had hurt his knee, making it extremely dangerous for Martin to continue solo. Reaching the third sump was a feat in itself, since the route was not only tortuous, but also extremely long, lasting for hours, as the first sump was about a mile into the cave.
What? He crawled for a mile.
How long does that take? Because it takes me like 13 minutes to fully sprint.
He said hours.
Do you think he identifies as a mole?
You have to at that point. He's more mole than man.
What are we doing as people? What are we doing? We're supposed to be monkeys. We're supposed to be in the trees.
A lot of me feels bad for these people, but then a small sliver of me is like, doesn't feel that bad. Because it's like, what are you doing? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, if you think about it, someone's got to do this.
No, they don't.
Nobody has to do this.
But all the discoveries from the caves, right?
These people see a cave called like the 10 Pits of Purgatory, and they're like, hey, let's go in.
Wait, I'm thinking about it more and more. Can't you just send a robot in here and map it out?
Yeah, but that's not as fun, Adam. These people have fun doing this.
Measured only 249 feet and 82 feet, so Martin passed through them relatively easily. However, the third sump was much longer, and nobody had fully explored it yet, so Martin could only hope he had enough air to reach the end. Fortunately, he managed to swim through it, about 850 feet, and on the other side, he found something else interesting, a zigzagging passage, roughly 1,800 feet long.
Let's guess. You guys think he's gonna keep going?
He's gonna keep going because he's insane, and it's gonna be a dead end, and he's gonna be stuck in there, and there's gonna be no way out.
It's only another mile? Okay, I'll do it. Yeah, no problem.
He doesn't know how far it is, and he literally has a limited supply of air with his tank. It's insanity. Maybe he doesn't go. Maybe this one is the one where someone doesn't die.
Nobody had known about this fourth sump, and Martin realized he probably wouldn't have enough air to explore it and then return. He spent the next 4 to 5 hours heading back out, planning to wait for Roger so they could tackle sump 4 together on the next trip. When they returned on June 15th,
he made it out. There we go.
Both Roger and Martin brought extra air tanks. They successfully reached sump 4 and began diving it with a guideline to help map the route. After about
at least they're being smart
feet,
about it.
Roger finished his guideline, and he had sinus problems, even though it wasn't the first time. Despite this, they decided to continue. Martin then took out his own guideline, and they kept going, but they made an important mistake. In cave diving, there is a concept called the rule of thirds for air consumption. If you use 1/3 of your air supply on the way in, you need another third to get out, leaving the final third as an emergency reserve. They had already used their first third and should have turned back when Roger's line ran out. Because Roger had a smaller tank than Martin, Martin assumed Roger would head out while he continued forward. He eventually came to a gravel wall of rock, which could have indicated the sump was ending, and possibly an air pocket. By this point, he was well past the halfway mark of his tank, so it was becoming extremely risky. He pushed on until he reached solid rock, confirming there was no air pocket. Spotting a passage to the right, he explored another 29 feet, but it ended in a dead end.
Kill himself.
When he backtracked, he was shocked to see Roger still there. Martin quickly signaled that they had to return. Roger, likely realizing he didn't have enough air to make it back, attempted to locate the same air pocket Martin had been searching for. Martin continued about 130 feet until his main tank ran out, forcing him to switch to a reserve tank. That would give him only about 300 feet in sump 4 and another 850 feet in sump 3, barely enough. However, he had previously placed a partially filled tank between sump 3 and sump 2, and he aimed to reach that. Finally emerging from sump 4, Martin sat on the bank, waiting for Roger, who, remember, had a smaller tank. If he didn't appear soon, it would be a huge problem. After 20 minutes with no sign of Roger, Martin realized that if Roger had surfaced from sump 4 at that moment, he likely wouldn't have enough air left to get through sump 3. After an hour, Martin was certain Roger's air had run out. Martin entered the water again and tried pulling the guideline to make it tense, but it didn't. It was no longer connected. It had been cut at about the 430-foot mark. This was probably where Roger needed to change tanks. Because switching them wasn't a simple task at the time, he might have put his arm through the line to avoid losing it, twisted his body to reach the valve, and become tangled, forcing him to cut the line to move freely. This, combined with the silt kicked up by movement, likely reduced his visibility, and he may have swum the wrong way. At that point, there was no doubt Roger had exhausted his air.
I mean, he must have been panicking. He must have been panicking like crazy then, because he had to switch tanks underwater while being like tangled up. He's probably freaking out down there. Can't see nothing.
We just did scuba diving for the first time, and the one main thing that they told us not to do was to panic, because that's when you breathe more, and then you actually use up more oxygen, so your tank goes away quicker.
You could not pay me enough money to do something like this. These people are doing it for free. I don't get it.
I don't, just turn back when the tank is halfway. What are they doing?
Stayed calm and managed to navigate the next 3 sumps safely. He alerted the authorities immediately, and the search for Roger's body began. Martin himself joined the search, along with many others. However, Roger's remains were not found until 1986, 12 years later.
Nah. What? Nah! I thought there's only one passageway. Where was he?
Oh my goodness. I mean, the caves just get bigger and bigger as you go through because most people aren't crazy enough to map them out. So I guess they were the first people in this cave.
They gotta keep shifting as well because doesn't, like, water erodes over time.
Facts.
Covering the body was deemed too risky, so it was left in the cave, and a plaque was placed near the entrance of Sump 1 in Roger's honor. In 1987...
Do you guys think there's people that saw that? Never mind, he's about to answer my question. There's people that saw that grave in the cave, and they kept going because they're brave.
Brave is a strong word. I would say they're crazy.
Passed through Sump 4 and finally located the air pocket, 875 feet in, the very one Roger and Martin had hoped to find. It was called the Against All Odds Chamber. Martin stated that after this incident, he never broke the rule of thirds again. He went on to have a remarkable diving career. Today, the entrance to the cave system is locked, and only specific, experienced divers are granted a key. Floyd Collins.
That's telling me
that's for the best.
There's people that still go in that cave to this day.
Yes.
What?
I don't think you could pay me enough money to do any of that.
$100 million, Alec.
That's okay, I'm in.
That's what I said.
I'm in.
I just changed Alec's mind. He's in.
Oh, nah, I'm good.
Alec, your broad shoulders, you are not surviving that cave. And you breathe a lot, too. Every one of your breaths is like 3 of that dude's breaths.
You have sinus problems.
Sorry, $100 million? I can't pass up on that.
When you're actually there, Alec, I think you'd pass it up. It ain't worth it.
Floyd Collins incident. In late December 1924, Floyd Collins discovered a cave called Sand Cave, which was easily accessible to tourists because it was near a highway. He quickly struck a deal with the land's owners to receive 50% of any profits from the cave's exploration.
Ooh.
Afterward, he immediately began working.
Is that why people explore the caves for like gold, diamonds, stuff like that?
That's probably part of it sometimes, yeah, but some people are mentally insane and still do it anyway without any promise of money.
They just do it for the fun, okay. Now that money's involved,
There's no significant entrance, however. Many tourists avoided it. As a result, Floyd spent hours every day over the next few weeks digging deeper and deeper. On January 30th, 1925, it was snowing outside, and once again, Floyd went into the cave, only to find something shocking. Crawling forward with a lantern, he reached what was known as the turnaround room, called that way because many cavers would stop there and turn around, deeming it too risky to continue. The only way to go farther was through a tiny, narrow hole called the
Why would he do it alone?
Only 9 inches in
Do
height.
not.
9 inches? My head is bigger than 9 inches. My head can't make it through that.
This is 9 inches right here, guys.
Let alone my shoulders and my booty cheeks. Like, what the?
How does he do that?
I've watched videos of people doing similar stuff to this, and it literally, you have to tilt your head sideways, and the only way you can move is if you breathe out. You have to go like this. And then you start squeezing, and then you can breathe a little bit. And then you breathe out. And then you keep squirming.
I wouldn't even do that in a video game. I'd be scared for the character.
Push through. Beyond the squeeze, he saw a narrow pit dropping about 10 feet. He went down feet first and reached the bottom, where he found yet another pit. Squatting down, he removed the remaining rocks and debris and finally saw an opening into the main cave.
Where do they go?
He tied a rope in place and descended an 80-foot drop. Reaching the cavern floor, he was amazed by the sight.
Okay, this is kind of cool.
It's kind of awesome.
Starting to dim. Wanting to avoid being left in the dark, he climbed back up the 80-foot drop and began returning, moving.
I think think he's gonna get stuck in the same one that he tried to get through, because it's gonna be different than when he came back in.
Yeah, you have to do it all in reverse.
Yeah.
It's like being able to do a front flip is different from being able to do a back flip.
Wait,
Yeah.
Do you think he's gonna go foot first or head first?
You have to
He's
go
gotta
ahead
go
first.
head first.
You gotta go
Yeah.
head first. All right.
Stupid
And
question.
pushing his lantern with his shoulder. Unfortunately,
Dude.
his lantern slipped into a tiny hole and shattered,
Oh.
leaving him in total
Oh.
darkness.
Yep.
Because the
No.
cavern was extremely unstable, Floyd knew he had to move
Oh.
carefully to avoid dislodging loose rocks. Unable to see, however,
no.
he kicked one loose
No!
and it fell onto his left
No!
leg, trapping him. He tried freeing himself with his
God.
right leg, but the more he moved, the more rocks tumbled down,
Oh my
further
God.
wedging him in place. It was
Oh,
10
no.
a.m., and he began shouting for help, hoping someone
Thank
would
God
hear
it's a
him.
stick
He remained
animation.
there all day, and by
Thank God.
9 a.m. the next morning, nearly 24 hours after he had become
What?
trapped, two of the cave's owners arrived with their 17-year-old son, Jewel Estes, to check on him. They saw Floyd's coat hanging outside the cave and called his name, but no one answered, so they ventured deeper. Before long, the two owners turned back because the
See ya.
passages were too tight, but Jewel continued
Okay.
and eventually found Floyd, who asked him to call his brothers for help. Soon, Marshall Collins, Floyd's brother, and Lee Collins,
no.
Floyd's father, reached the entrance, finding a growing crowd watching the rescue attempt. Marshall
What-
and another
why are
man
they
went
watching?
inside to
I mean, it's like a train wreck. You gotta watch it. You can't look away.
You gotta leave them be. You're just causing problems.
Say this, you're on the highway, you see a group of people, you pull over, you check it out. You find out that somebody is stuck in a cave. You're just gonna be like, oh, okay. And then you keep driving?
Yeah, well, you make space for the people that need to be there for help. They're just gathering around for their own amusement. This is a life and death situation.
I think I would stay.
in the passage, digging carefully so as not to send loose rocks tumbling onto Floyd. At 4 p.m., Floyd's other brother Homer arrived. Floyd had previously
Homer.
asked Homer to come along that day, so Homer felt guilty for refusing and did his best to help. He did reach Floyd, but a new problem emerged. The crowds outside had started multiple bonfires. The
Okay.
melting ice
Why?
funneled water
Dude.
into
No.
the cave, creating mud and sending
Are you
freezing
kidding me?
cold water down
See, this
toward
is what I'm
Floyd.
saying,
After
Adam.
8 hours
That is crazy.
That is the worst one yet.
They are gonna kill him.
That's insane.
with Floyd, his brothers had to rest. Upon emerging, Homer grew furious at the huge crowd, telling people to leave if they couldn't help. However, none of them listened. Reporters began
What?
arriving, hoping to interview Homer.
Jack, that's
tired
you.
of the questions.
Yep, that's
He told them
Jack
to
right
see
there.
For themselves inside
What did
the
I do?
cave. Confusion and rumors.
You're probably
spread.
peeing in
Some
the
claimed
cave so the
Floyd
water
was
goes down?
already
No!
dead, or that the cave had collapsed entirely. Determined to prove otherwise, Marshall offered a $500,000 reward to anyone who saved his brother. As rumors spread more, however, he went in to check on Floyd himself and found him alive. Floyd managed to
What?
free one hand, suggesting they tie a rope around his chest to pull him out. But as soon as they tried, he
no.
begged them to stop, saying he felt like he was being pulled in two. Homer worked
Oh.
continuously, removing dirt and debris until he was utterly exhausted and needed medical attention. By Tuesday night, 95 hours after Floyd had
This
become
is
trapped, a
horrible.
reporter named Skeets entered the cave and
Okay.
installed
No.
a light
Who?
bulb
No,
on Floyd.
Skeets.
While removing rubble, Skeets exposed more of Floyd's legs, but still couldn't free him. His story and interview with Floyd were published, drawing even larger crowds. Hotels
Oh,
nearby
no.
were filled, and at least 1,000
Seriously?
people gathered around Sand
Dang.
Cave. All this activity further
that's so
weakened the
messed
cave
up.
walls, putting it at risk of
No!
collapse.
Dude, the people are gonna kill him again!
Literally, like everything that could have gone wrong here has gone wrong.
I guess I'm what's wrong with society. Why would I stay there?
This could have been preventable. A, if he didn't go in the cave, and B, if he wasn't surrounded by a bunch of absolute idiots.
They're probably jumping all drunk, acting like it's a tailgate. Like, this is a serious thing.
Like, there's people that heard about this in the news and then legit went there just to hang out.
But he realized it at the time, as everyone was rooting for Floyd. At hour
Okay, at least they're rooting
123,
for him.
the entrance to the pit collapsed, blocking any
dead.
access to
Oh
Floyd
my
and
God.
cutting off deliveries of
They
food
messed
and
him up.
water. By
That's
hour
literally their fault.
144, a team of
Yep.
workers formed to dig a new tunnel to reach
That's
him.
so
The
messed
only
up.
way they could know if Floyd was still alive was the light bulb Skeets had installed. It was connected to another bulb outside, which would flicker when Floyd breathed. They dug relentlessly, but
Whoa,
with no
that's cool.
food
How do they
or
do that?
water reaching Floyd.
That's really
combined
cool.
With the cold temperature, his chances were fading quickly. By Friday, February 13th, the men had nearly reached him, and one worker reported hearing groaning about 10 feet away. However, at 1:30 a.m. on February 16th, a worker reached Floyd and found him already deceased. Initially,
No.
Floyd's body was left in the cave. After some time, though, his brother Homer arranged for its removal and gave him a proper burial.
That's a
John
weird name.
Jones, a young 26-year-old man, decided to explore the Nutty Putty Cave in the Utah desert near Salt Lake City. This wasn't his
Yeah, like,
first
you're
caving
26.
experience, as he and his
Sure
brother
am.
Josh used to explore cave caves around Utah, even though it was the first time he would have gone into the Nutty Putty cave specifically. The cave was considered beginner-friendly, as it was well-mapped, and the first main parts were accessible to everyone, such as the maze or the big slide. There were also some harder areas for more experienced cavers, like the birth canal, which was an incredibly tight passage. John wasn't going alone. He went with a group of 11, including family and friends. The cave was closed off at the time because some cavers had previously gotten stuck, but it was reopened and accessible only to those with a specific permit.
Isn't like the one thing you don't want to do in cave diving is go with a lot of people?
I have no idea. Wouldn't you want to go with people so that they can save you?
No, imagine
I would rather go with people.
No, I'd rather go with literally 3 people max, because if one person gets stuck, everybody behind them is also stuck. So if there's 11 people, then there's a higher percent chance that somebody gets stuck, so that everybody gets stuck.
Why would everyone get stuck if one person is stuck?
Because there's only one way in and one way out, you idiot!
You're saying like if in the middle of the pack someone gets stuck, then everyone in front of them can't come back because he's stuck there.
Yes, and then nobody behind can save him because the dude is just jamming it up.
That would never ever happen.
A good rule for caving and to not get hurt while caving is to never go caving. Never go caving, guys. If you see a cave that is named Nutty Putty, turn around and go to Chick-fil-A.
I think this is a very misleading name. Why would you ever name a cave Nutty Putty? They knew what they were doing when they named that thing.
Josh managed to get one, and on November 24th, 2009, they went in. Everyone stayed in the beginner-friendly areas, but John and Josh quickly got bored and started looking for the harder tunnels they had heard about. They knew about the birth canal, one of the tightest passages in the cave, which, after the narrowest part, had a room where they could stand up and turn around to head back. They ventured into the narrow passages of the cave, and at one point, they reached an area called the corkscrew, named that way because of how hard it was to get through. It was after the corkscrew that cavers...
Okay, if you come up to a spot in a cave called the corkscrew or the birth canal, general rule of thumb, don't go. It's like Monopoly. You're in jail. Do not go. Do not collect $200. Turn around and go home and watch Netflix, okay? You're gonna die. Even if it's mapped, you're gonna die.
If things aren't working out in the YouTube game, I would definitely start naming caves as my full-time job. It sounds awesome.
You might as well just name it Lucifer's Butthole.
I wonder if cavers have to be like super flexible along with being skinny. Because you know how some people could like put their arm, like dislocate their shoulder and throw it behind them in weird ways? Like they might be able to maneuver the corkscrew pretty easily. You know what I'm saying?
Alec, please tell me you're not thinking about going into the corkscrew, okay? Because I don't want to see a crackhead going through the corkscrew.
Dude, if Alec climbs down there...
I'm not a crackhead for one, and two, I would never do that a million jillion years. There's no chance.
If you go in Nutty Putty Cave, you're gonna crack your head, and therefore you're gonna be a crackhead going through the corkscrew.
Normally turn around, but 5 years before, an accident had happened in that exact spot. A 16-year-old boy named Brock Clark got stuck there, even though he was just 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed only 140 pounds. He had to wait a whole 14 hours before getting free. John, however, was 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds, so he clearly knew he couldn't turn around to go back in that specific part of the tunnel. In a space only 12 inches high, he squeezed his stomach in and kept moving forward until he got to a point where he was headfirst at a downward angle. It looked like there was an area ahead where he could finally turn around, so he kept going in. But what he didn't know was that beyond that ledge, the area was uncharted. No one had been there before him. He still thought he was in some part of the birth canal, and since he knew many cavers felt stuck just like he was, but eventually found a place to turn around, he continued on. After a while, however, he started sliding toward the bottom of the tunnel, almost doing a handstand to hold on and try to push himself back up. He immediately yelled to his brother to stop, and they started discussing what they should do, as John's arms were starting to lose strength.
Now I know why it's called Nutty Putty. Uh-oh, he's stuck.
That's probably like the literally scariest situation possible. If you're flipped upside down, doesn't all the blood go to your head and then you die from like whatever? I don't even know what that's called.
I did hear that that's good for hair growth though, Alec.
You do want to get blood flow to the head for hair growth. However, it is bad for your health to do it for too long. You can actually die from being held upside down.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Is that how like super geniuses become a thing because they have so much blood in their brain that it's like working at such a high level?
No, Adam, that's how you die.
So I shouldn't start standing on my head?
Don't start standing on your head, and definitely stay away from any cave. Stay away from caves, people.
Decided to move forward just a little more and then turn around because John saw a hole in the floor ahead that he thought might lead to a larger space. Dude, what he didn't realize, however, was that it was just a dead-end opening at the bottom of the tunnel. So once he went in, he was stuck in a vertical position, upside down. The opening was just 18 by 10 inches, and any effort to get out proved useless, so he screamed for help. His brother Josh came in feet first and squeezed one of John's legs with his own, trying to pull him out. This also didn't work, and after Josh became exhausted, they decided that he would exit the cave to call for help. John waited there upside down, and gravity kept pushing him further into the opening, with his chest getting compressed against the wall.
He's literally head first against gravity.
The first rescuer arrived after 3 hours. She had a rope tied to her ankle, so she could be pulled back out while she put another rope around John's legs to try to pull him out.
Isn't that torture method? 3+ hours with your head upside down?
Oh, yeah.
He's probably dead already. He's got to be. There's no way.
No, he's not dead.
You
3 hours of hanging upside down?
Yeah, you could survive for a long time like that. Humans are pretty, resilient when it comes to this sort of thing. I was gonna ask though, like, how do you become a cave rescuer? That just seems like such a weird job for anybody to want to do.
Somebody has to do it, Jack. They're not just gonna let him die. Like, if I had to do it, I would do it.
It's probably so sad because I wonder like how many people they can't rescue, and they're watching that person's last breaths, and they're stuck. That's got to be a sad job.
It's probably doesn't even pay that much. Like, at least when you're a doctor and you fail surgery, at least you can go home to your mansion.
And they're risking their lives too. It's not like doctors are risking their lives, like these cave saver people, they could easily get stuck too.
That's what I'm saying. She went into Nutty Putty knowing that she was going to have to go through the birth canal. She was going to have to go through Lucifer's rectum. She was going to have to go through the corkscrew. She was going to have to go through all of these very narrow areas for a slim chance to even find this dude and then somehow pull him out. It's an impossible job.
Also didn't work, so they decided to install a pulley system, which was much stronger than just a human pull, and it was what had gotten Brock Clark free 5 years prior. However, this required a lot of time.
Is that the same guy?
Each piece of equipment had to be brought through the entire cave, which took nearly an hour. Also, only one assistant at a time could be there, and only small tools could be brought in. After spending the whole night there, John's body was starting to show the signs of being upside down for more than 12 hours. He had been completely lucid up to that point, but now he was starting to lose his sanity, hallucinating. The oxygen concentration in the air was also dropping lower and lower. During this time, they brought in a device that allowed him to speak with his wife, who encouraged him to hang on. John
probably
so sad.
After 12 hours, you probably get like the feeling of like you're on psychedelic mushrooms or something like that, I'm guessing. So imagine he's on the phone with his wife and she's all concerned and he's like, I see yellow. Do you know how the stars are made?
Adam, this poor guy is dying. This poor guy is stuck in a cave suffocating and you're laughing at him.
No, I'm not laughing at him. I'm
not
laughing
funny.
at the situation of him being, he's probably high.
I mean, yeah, at that point, he's probably not really saying much, right? Because he's been upside down for so long. He probably knows that there's a slim chance of him getting out of this. So what do you even say to your wife? You're gonna die in Nutty Putty Cave? Seriously?
No, it's not funny.
John assured her that he would be out with her soon. Around 4 o'clock, the pulleys were ready. So rescuer Ryan Schurz, who was inside the cave, grabbed John's legs and they activated the pulley.
Ryan.
John started screaming in agony as his legs turned blue and no longer had a pulse, telling them to stop. After
they're probably so numb.
To let him calm down, they tried again, and it seemed to be working. John rose high enough that Ryan was able to make eye contact with him and give him some Gatorade through a tube. His situation was still very bad, however, as his lifeless legs were hitting the ceiling and blocking him from getting out of the hole. They were strongly considering breaking his legs, as time was really starting to run out. Then, the rope holding the pulley broke, pulling everything toward Ryan's face and injuring his face, lips, tongue, and causing
Why are you laughing?
He lost
That just came out of
briefly,
nowhere.
And when he woke up, he immediately left the cave. Meanwhile,
No.
Bro probably had a concussion. He woke up and said, like, where am I? Let me get out of here.
How did he just get out though? It was like, had a concussion, woke up, and then he just turned around and gets out.
The whole thing
Why couldn't the first guy do that?
John is too big. John is 6 feet tall and he's bigger, and these cave rescuers are like 5'7", so they're able to maneuver a lot easier. So general rule of thumb, if you're over 6 foot, like all of us, we probably shouldn't go caving in Nutty Putty, like us.
If Jack was a real 6 foot, then he would get stuck.
Yeah, so guys like us probably should not go caving like that, especially in Nutty Putty, through the birth canal, through Lucifer's butthole. It's just not a good idea for guys like us over 6 feet. See, Beck is quite tall.
Beck is quite tall at around 5'11" inches. All right.
They had us in the first half.
Wow, they're very accurate.
John had slipped back into the hole, and it took another hour to repair the pulley. When they tried pulling him out once more, John wasn't responding. Since it would have been impossible to lift him without his help, they sent a medic inside the cave to check whether he was still alive. At 11:56 on November 25th, John Jones was declared dead. The entire cave system was then closed off with concrete, and they placed a plaque to commemorate John Jones's life. Juden Cave.
I'm sorry, but how does a medic get down there?
They're small, Alec. They are tiny. Do you understand physics?
Okay, but he's supposed to be like a professional cave diver.
You just crawled through a cave. Everybody can crawl through a cave, dummy.
No.
He's just a caver. Nobody dived anywhere yet. Nobody dived.
How does just a random medic get down there?
It's not a random medic. It's a cave medic, Alec.
What are you not getting through your brain?
Anyway, I feel like it was very respectful that they completely covered the cave so that nobody else could go through the birth canal into Lucifer's butthole down into the depths of to get stuck again. It's just, it was very nice. Next up, we have
Juden Cave.
Two friends, Wang Yuan and Wang Tao, were highly experienced divers who wanted to enter Juden Cave in China to break their own personal depth record. Someone had previously placed a guideline that extended for 525 feet, but they wanted to extend it by another 35 feet, aiming for a total depth of 558 feet. This plan would require them to leave the existing guideline for some time, and because those depths are already dangerous, doing so would have significantly increased the risk. However,
is it just me or like being underwater makes it 10 times scarier? Okay.
100%. I think if you're underwater though, you're less likely to have to go through like little tiny cramped spaces. Like that seemed pretty open. Well, at least in that case, it seemed pretty open, yeah.
In the other video we watched, it was cramped and it was underwater. It's insane.
I think I would rather do it if I was underwater because then there's no gravity and I would be smart about it and I wouldn't go into any small crevices where I would get stuck. I feel like the general rule of thumb for a cave diver should be, if my belly don't fit, I don't go.
That's just not how it works.
Yeah, Jack.
That's like saying, oh, if I would get stuck, I'm not gonna go. You don't know if you're gonna get stuck. That's the whole point.
But I do. I have two eyeballs, Alec, and they're 20/20 vision. I can see if I don't fit and I don't go.
They were not only diving experts in general, but also had already completed 15 dives in the cave's northern entrance, so they felt quite confident. They even decided to do a practice dive in open water to reach 500 feet, just to see what it would be like and identify potential problems. Unfortunately, Tao had to skip the practice dive due to illness, so Yuan went alone, and everything was
oh my God.
On April 18th,
okay, that's actually,
that's
pretty dumb.
They decided it was time to begin their dive. They estimated it would take about 20 minutes to reach their target depth, and they would only be able to stay there for a few minutes before starting their ascent. Even just a few extra minutes at those depths would require many additional hours of decompression. They also estimated it would take about 3 hours and 50 minutes to get back to the surface safely, allowing enough time for the pressure to not
all
be too
underwater
harsh on their bodies. Time was of the essence, as every minute mattered. When they started their descent, they noticed that visibility was greatly reduced because of the rainfall in the days prior, but they decided it was not bad enough to postpone the dive. Under normal conditions, divers could usually see about 50 feet ahead, but on that day, visibility was only about 6.5 feet. As extra safety measures, they had previously placed air tanks at various depths, each containing the appropriate gas mixture for that depth. Additionally,
I guarantee when hits the fan, they're not going to be able to find where the oxygen tanks are.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, they should not have gone when visibility was so low. Having 50 feet of visibility is great. You could see stuff and you don't have to worry about running into something unexpected, but only 6 feet of visibility? That's insane. That's like how tall I am. And 6 feet of visibility is not enough when you're down at those depths, guys. Not enough.
I'm not really understanding how there was ever any visibility at all, because they're 500 feet underwater. There's no light down there.
You ever hear of a flashlight freak?
Why do their flashlights not work now? I don't get it.
Because the debris in the water, Alec. The debris in the water, it's murky. Oh my God, I hate him. I think I hate him.
How did it get murky?
The rain, Alec.
But why would rain make it murky? Rain is clear.
Discombobulated all of the water. Yeah, it might be clear, but it's drip dropping. And you know when you drop a something into water and then it makes the sand and the dirt.
It's like, Alec, it's like when your fat is on the beach and you're kicking up sand. Now the whole ocean is filled with sand.
Kinda, yeah. Anyway, let's see if these guys survive.
A friend named Pei stayed near the cave's surface to assist if needed. Yuan's role was to keep them on the guideline, while Tao's role was to place arrow markers along the line to indicate the direction back to the cave entrance. At such extreme depths, having the correct gas mixture is crucial because both nitrogen and oxygen can become problematic under high pressure. They followed all the guidelines carefully, switching tanks at the appropriate depths. However, around 538 feet, Yuan suddenly felt as though he might lose consciousness, realizing they needed to ascend to encounter these symptoms.
Maybe he was just in
considering
meditation
they were only
state.
13 feet beyond the established guideline, with visibility around half that distance, they turned back toward the line and the surface. Yuan led them to where the guideline
at
should
least
have
they
been,
went
but they
safe.
were met with a terrifying situation. The guideline was gone. They searched desperately, hoping to feel or spot it, and eventually found it. But now, there was another problem. Their panic at losing the line had caused them to breathe faster, which consumed more gas than normal. By the time they rediscovered the line, Yuan's cylinder for that depth was nearly empty, so he had to switch back to his main tank, which contained surface air. This was far from ideal. Although
what's the difference between surface air and that tank air, Jack?
So Alec knows. Alec is an air professional.
I forgot. Yeah.
Well, when you get to those depths, there's so much pressure that you need a different mixture of oxygen and nitrogen. And so when you're that deep, you don't actually want a tank that's full of just purely oxygen because you need some nitrogen in there too. And so he had to switch back to his only oxygen tank because it was full enough to get back to the top. But apparently it's not ideal at those pressures for reasons I'm actually not sure.
Well put, Alec, and I can actually compound on your knowledge here. I will say that the surface air is not going to be great for the situation. They've already panicked, and one of them is already about to become unconscious. So with all of these factors considered, he's going to pass out.
Yeah, that might not be the worst though, because when you pass out, you breathe a lot slower. You know, it's like... So maybe he's just conserving his oxygen, the little bit that he has left, and then his buddy can just pull him up as he's breathing nice and slow. Win-win.
They might be able to survive this.
he initially felt okay, around the 393-foot mark, he began trembling involuntarily. They desperately needed to reach their next set of cylinders, which were at 243 feet, about 150 feet away. Yuan still had hope until he looked down and saw Tao stuck under a rock. Because of the low
hands or
visibility,
something.
Tao had accidentally swam into the rock and gotten wedged there. Yuan also noticed that Tao wasn't attempting to free himself, but was instead shining his light at his neck, signaling that
he's out of oxygen. The pressure is getting to his head. He's literally shining the flashlight at his own eyes, like, help! Help!
Oh, he's shining it at his neck to tell his buddy that he has no more oxygen, Adam.
That makes way more sense. I don't know why they didn't hold hand. Why did he hold on to the rope?
They need to make a safe state right here.
Yeah, I will say I agree with Adam because in the previous video that we watched, the guy got lost because he lost the rope. You just gotta put the rope like on your body somewhere, and then you gotta make sure you never lose the rope because that is literally your only lifeline.
They also need a guy at the top that literally calls in and like starts pulling the rope. Why don't they have a rope pull guy?
They do. They have Pay. Pay's up there.
Who's Pay?
He's the guy that's gonna pull the rope if things go bad.
Why is he not pulling the rope? It's time to pull the rope.
I don't think he knows that things have gone so bad.
He was running out of air. Yuan immediately gave Tao an emergency mouthpiece, and Tao freed himself. They resumed their ascent with very little air left, sharing what remained.
Friend.
After some quick calculations, they realized they had roughly 3 minutes of air before it would be gone. Tao was extremely fatigued, and Yuan had to pull him by the arm. When they were about 300 feet from the surface, Yuan checked his air supply again and saw there was only enough for one person to ascend another 130 feet. Fortunately, about 50 feet away were the next set of cylinders they had placed earlier. Suddenly, Yuan saw Tao float past him, rising upward and disappearing in the murky water.
Stop letting him
Yuan
go!
knew Tao must have lost consciousness because he made no attempt to hold on. Yuan swam after him as quickly as he could, but he couldn't see Tao anywhere. With his tank about to run dry, he had to reach the next set of cylinders before searching again. He quickly got to those cylinders, switched tanks, and went back to look for Tao. As he descended once more, he still couldn't find him. His new tank began to run low, so he had to ascend again to the next set of cylinders. Unfortunately, those cylinders were placed at a higher depth because they were meant for use in shallower water, and they would be extremely dangerous to use at deeper depths. If someone were to use those tanks and descend too far, they would risk nitrogen narcosis, a state similar to drunkenness, as nitrogen is absorbed too rapidly. Despite—
I mean, that's not the worst thing if you're trying to save your friend.
That is like the worst thing ever. What he's saying is that once you put that tank on, you can't go down too low because you're basically going to become incognizant and your brain's going to get all loopy, and then you're not going to be able to find Tao. You're not going to be able to find anything.
You can do things when you're drunk if your mind's in the right state.
But if he keeps going down, his lungs will legit explode or something.
That's not what he said at all. What are you talking about? He did not say that.
By the way, if anyone out there is confused as to why the dude who passed out started floating, because normally a body would sink, when you're in a scuba suit, you're able to inflate and deflate your suit depending on if you want to go up or down. So his was like probably fully inflated because they were going so fast up that even though he passed out, he's still going to keep going up and up and up. He probably hit his head again though because he couldn't stop. So he probably smashed his head on a rock, which wouldn't be too good.
Yeah.
They got to invent helmets for scuba divers.
Despite this risk, Yuan still tried to go deeper in search of Tao. At some point, he lost consciousness briefly, and although he woke up moments later, it was the warning sign that he needed to get out immediately. He attempted to follow the necessary decompression stops on the way up, but in his panicked and weakened state, he ascended faster than he should have, stopping for about 3 hours instead of the nearly 4 hours required. Upon surfacing, Yuan immediately told Pei what had happened. Shocked, Pei dove in to search for Tao, but soon realized Yuan might also be in serious trouble because of his rapid ascent. Matter of fact, when Pei returned to the surface, he found Yuan showing symptoms of both nitrogen narcosis and decompression sickness. As soon as Yuan removed his regulator, he began vomiting and twitching, experiencing severe dizziness. They had no choice but to abandon the immediate search for Tao in order to get Yuan urgent medical.
Dude, this is like an ethical question. Like, what do you do?
You gotta save this guy.
Are you sure?
Definitely. I think you have to, yeah.
If there's a chance that he's gonna die, you gotta save this guy. But if it's like, oh, he's just gonna be really sick, but he'll, you know, he can stick it through if he, you know, whatever, it's just gonna be a bad couple of days for him, then I would go in and be like, sorry, bud, I'm gonna go try to save the guy that might be dead.
What if it's like a 70% chance that he's okay, 30% chance that he dies, but the guy in the water, there's a 100% chance that he's gonna die if you don't dive in right there?
I think exactly what this guy's doing is what you should do. You should call for help, right? And then maybe try to go search for the other guy that's in the water, so that you can't really do much right now. You're not gonna drag this guy to a hospital. You're gonna have to get him some help, like a helicopter lift or something like that, to be able to get him to the hospital. But then the other guy, I mean, the chances of him living through this is really low at this point.
That other dude is dead. He's dead. Let's be honest. I mean, it took whatever this guy's name, 3 hours to get back up. 3 hours they've been separated. There's just no way the other guy's still alive. There's no way.
Unless he's Aquaman.
Help. By this time, Yuan was in agonizing pain, especially in his legs. Fortunately, rescuers arrived quickly, but before anyone could re-enter the cave, they needed a full day to plan and gather the correct tanks for those depths.
What?
By then, it was almost certain that Tao had died, and the following day, his lifeless body was found at a depth of 176 feet. Yuan spent several days in a decompression chamber, but ultimately made a full recovery.
Yes.
Calima Cave tragedy.
All right, I think that just goes to show with that last one, those guys were experts. They had everything in place. They did a practice run. Even when you have everything planned in a cave diving situation, things could still go terribly wrong, which is another reason why you should not go cave diving. Do not go cave diving. No, I know you're thinking about it. Do not go cave diving.
Jack, the one guy missed practice.
Yeah, they only had one practice and the guy missed it. And then they decided to go anyway on a terrible day that they can't even see. I feel bad for them, but at the same time, it's like, come on.
They're experts.
Be better.
We're not smarter than them. They definitely knew going in, like, there was a good chance that they were going to be fine. But
I think they were just overly confident.
Everything went wrong.
The last one is the Calima Cave tragedy.
Well, this one looks like sunshine and rainbows.
It was December 2004, and 9 divers were about to enter the Calima cenote for the second time while on vacation in Mexico. Their plan was to follow the guidelines to the Boschchen cenote before turning back. They split into 2 groups. The first would go ahead and set markers to highlight the correct path, while the second would follow. Since the first group had more efficient oxygen tanks, they planned to go farther before returning, while the second group would start heading back.
Looks like
early.
a treasure map.
As Team 2 was expected to resurface first, they would remove a specific type of marker called cookies to signal their exit. Seeing that the cookies were gone, Team 1 would then remove their own markers on the way back, ensuring the cave remained clean for future divers. Everything went according to plan. Team 1, noticing the absence of the cookies, began their ascent, but when they resurfaced, Team 2 was nowhere to be found. They searched the area for 30 minutes, but found no sign of them. Regrouping at the Calima cenote, they geared up to re-enter the tunnel and search for them. By this point, Team 2 had little oxygen left, but suddenly, bubbles appeared in the water. And
so an entire team went missing, like a full team.
Yeah, which I'm confused about because the cookies were gone, which meant that that team did go back and picked up after their tracks, so they should have been okay, but then
somebody messed up the cookies.
If Alec was on that trail, he'd be like, ooh, a cookie.
They got a cookie monster out there. Someone just eating all the cookies.
Somebody messed up the cookie placement.
It's a weird name for a marker. I love it though.
2 divers quickly resurfaced. They immediately began explaining what had happened underwater. Instead of following the intended exit path, Team 2 had mistakenly turned left. The return should have been short, but they only realized their mistake after swimming 1,400 feet in the wrong direction. By the time they noticed, they were nearly 3,000 feet from the original exit. However, another exit was just 300 feet away. Reaching.
Can't they tell by the pressure though, of like if they're going deeper, then it's more pressure on your head and you gotta do this? to get the pressure?
They might not have been going down. They might have just been going horizontally.
It looks like they're going down by that map.
Maybe. But what I'm confused about is they literally had markers. How? I really don't understand how you can't go back. It's like in Minecraft and you're in a cave. You put torches down to know where you've been. All you gotta do is follow torches to go back home.
They honestly should have done torches. Torches would have been way better because then you could see the light. Imagine the shaky glow sticks.
Yes, I think that's literally what they did, along with cookies. So they put 2 things down on the way down. They put the glowstone thing, the lighty thing. The cookie is just a signal to the other team if they're still there or they're not still there.
Oh, is anyone else hungry?
I've seen you've been snacking this whole video, Adam.
We talking about cookies here? I mean, come on, give me a break.
It posed a serious challenge. They needed to cross a 70-foot gap with no guidelines, making it a dangerous risk of getting lost. Kent, one of the divers, took out his safety line, secured it, and began swimming across. He was just short of reaching the guideline when his line stopped him. It was too short to cover the long gap. Time was running out, and turning back, Kent saw the rest of the group heading toward the initial path, so he swam fast to catch up. By then, their oxygen levels were critically low, and with no air pockets in the cave, the situation was becoming life-threatening. After 25 minutes of swimming, they finally reached the correct line. A 30-minute swim still lay between them and the exit. Bill's oxygen was nearly gone, with only 200 psi left.
They can
he
share.
moved next to
that's
Jean,
really
who had
little.
more air, and she shared hers using her emergency extra mouthpiece. The situation was so bad that in tight passages, Bill had to hold his breath while Jean squeezed through first. Then Michael also began running dangerously low on air.
Do you think that these people kind of like the anxiety and the adrenaline rush that they get, similar to like X Games and stuff like that, where there's a small chance that, you know, there's danger and that they could die at any point? Do you think that that's like half the reason why they do this?
It's 1,000% the entire reason they do this. Because there's like, when you go into that type of cave where you literally, it's like you can't see anything else. You're not going for the views. You're going for the experience, like the feeling of knowing that you're in danger, but you made it out alive. It's like, wow!
I think it's a mix of both, because I think going into the caves, they probably see some really cool things. So like just the experience of being down there is cool.
It's like you shrink down and go into someone's butthole. Like that's what you're seeing. There's nothing cool about it.
That Jean and Bill were already sharing and could not help him, he panicked. He was the least experienced of the group, and his tank was almost empty. Fortunately, Kent reached him in time, handed him his emergency mouthpiece, and tried to calm him down. Meanwhile, Jean and Bill made it out with just 500 psi left in Jean's tank. Had they been delayed just a few more minutes, they would have drowned. They immediately informed the others that Michael and Kent were behind them. Their lights had been visible just before they exited. The remaining divers quickly re-entered the tunnel, hoping to find them in time. Just 250 feet inside, they spotted Michael and Kent's lights. But something was wrong. They weren't moving. As they got closer, the truth became clear. Both had run out of oxygen and drowned just 5 minutes from the exit. William Coughlin.
There we go.
It was May 28, 1993, when 26-year-old William Coughlin, with a newfound passion for caving, decided to visit a cave in Kentucky with his friends James and Kevin. The cave was divided into 2 sections.
That could be
the
us.
historic tour, which was accessible to most visitors, and the more dangerous wild tour, reserved for experienced and daring
Not
people.
for me.
After completing the easier historic tour, the guide asked if they wanted to proceed with the more challenging wild tour. Once they agreed, they were required to sign a document acknowledging the risks involved and absolving the operators of any responsibility.
Just as soon as there is a contract that comes out when you're in a cave that says, do you want to go on the wild tour? You might die in Satan's twisty butthole. You say no. You go home, you turn on Netflix, and you watch a documentary about caving because it is so deadly. Why would you do that?
Immediate red flag. Who has contracts and liability waivers in a cave? They're already in the cave. He was ready too. He pulled that out. He's like, yeah, sign it.
He probably had his own pen. He was ready to sign his life away.
What are you guys talking about? Of course there's waivers.
There was no waiver for the first part, but if he's like, all right, if you want to go down this deep dark cave, you got to sign my contract, which means that it's so much more dangerous. So that's like a red flag. That's what we're saying. Like, get out of there. That's when you'd be like, nope, sorry, bud. Don't want your quarters. Don't want milk.
I'm so confused. Who is there? Do they just have like a cave troll guide in the back of the cave near the twisty Satan butthole part that just spawns out of nowhere when you want to go back there? He's like, to access my hole, you must sign my contracts.
You must be level 25 or higher to go through.
Well, when you word it like that, I'd sign.
No, I'd probably do it too.
Should have been the first red flag, and Kevin decided to opt out, returning to the safer area.
Wow.
The remaining group, now consisting of William, James, and 4 other participants, was led by the guide into the wild tour.
That's great.
He stressed the importance of staying close and reminded them of the potential dangers. As they descended into the lower sections of the cave, they encountered a 30-foot hanging cable ladder with wooden rungs rungs. After climbing down and going a bit forward, there was a second, shorter ladder.
Okay, that is definitely not to scale. 30 feet.
Obviously, Adam.
I know. I'm trying to visualize it though, but
Yeah.
like for the viewers, that's way longer than what it's showing.
Everyone understands that. There wasn't one person confused, Adam.
There was definitely one person confused, and now they're like, "Oh, okay." It was me.
So I'm trying to figure out, where does this go wrong?
I think it's gonna be something the ladder. I think there's gonna be a malfunction with the ladder. Let's find out.
Down and going a bit forward, there was a second, shorter ladder. At the bottom of the second ladder, the guide informed the group that the official tour had ended. He mentioned they could explore nearby passages if they wished, but noted that they were running behind schedule and that he needed to step away briefly for a photo. He left the group at the base of the ladder, and this is when William...
They're at the bottom of the cave. You can't end the tour. The tour is not over.
That's like if you're like going with a scuba diver and you're at like 200 feet below the surface of the ocean, and then the guide's like, all right, I gotta go make a call. Tour's over. You can stay if you want. Have fun.
That was somewhere deep in the contract. That's where you never sign a contract like that.
He took him all the way to Satan's butthole and was like, all right, guys, have fun.
Go through the fiery gates of hell. Have a blast.
Oh my gosh, this is about to be awful.
Decided to explore a passage he had noticed earlier. He discussed it with James, who agreed, and William attempted to climb back up the second ladder. However, the climb proved difficult. He was 6 feet tall and weighed 220 pounds. Struggling to ascend, William decided to wait for the guide instead. As time passed and the guide didn't return, William attempted to climb the ladder again. Tragically, halfway up, he lost his grip and fell violently, striking his head on a protruding rock before landing hard on the ground. Blood began pooling from his head, and James rushed to help him. Although William remained conscious, he was delirious and visibly stunned. When the guide finally returned, he instructed the group to climb back out the way they came. However, William's condition made this impossible. James, frustrated, demanded the guide call a cave rescue team, but the guide dismissed the idea, insisting that the group work together
This might
to get
be
William
some jail
out.
time for this
James
guy.
began to suspect the guide was avoiding involving authorities, perhaps to prevent panic among other visitors. The group decided their best option was to bypass the second ladder entirely and take an alternative route through a narrow,
That's a
previously
horrible
mapped
idea.
corridor,
That's
not
awful.
part of the official tour. With teamwork, they managed to navigate the initial section, carrying William with them. However, the real challenge came when they reached a rough, sharp V-shaped passage, which made gripping difficult. When it was William's turn, he went in head
Twisty
first, but his
butthole.
size made it an extremely tight fit.
Why would he
Halfway
go in
through,
last?
he became stuck and realized he couldn't move forward or backward. Trapped in a horizontal position with his arms pinned beneath him, he began to panic. The tightness of the passage compressed his chest, making it difficult for him to breathe. The group's attempts to pull him out were futile. As panic set in, the guide instructed James to exit the cave and inform the owner of the situation. James rushed to the surface, but the owner appeared reluctant to involve authorities. The guide, finally recognizing the severity of the situation, went out to get a medkit and to call for emergency services. It took 3 hours for rescue and medical personnel to arrive. Meanwhile, James stayed by William's side, trying to keep him calm, but William's responses grew slower and more slurred until he eventually stopped responding altogether.
When
rescuers reached William, they faced immense challenges. The downward angle of the passage made it difficult to revive him. They brought in heaters to protect him from hypothermia and began evacuating the rest of the group, leaving only James behind to witness what was happening to his friend. A pulley system was installed to try to free William, but every tug caused him immense pain, so much so that he once again started groaning in agony.
Go backwards?
The rescue team worked tirelessly throughout Saturday, but after 17 hours of efforts,
he's also
William
bleeding
was tragically pronounced dead. It took an additional 7 hours to extract his body from the cave.
Bro, that's sad.
I wanted to take this segment to announce today's sponsor.
You can't. That's crazy. He just did a
No
sponsor.
way!
That is insane that he just hit us with a sponsor right there. For War Thunder. Dude, I'm sorry. What? That is awful timing for a sponsor.
This is what just happened. He was like, they dragged his lifeless corpse out of the cave. And thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. War Thunder is a game about murdering other people in giant vehicles.
Oh my God.
I can't believe that. I actually can't believe that. That's crazy.
So what
that's
you're telling
insane.
me is William is bleeding out, and the cave guide, his first thing that he wants to do is like, nah, bro, we're good. We don't need rescue services. We have the power of friendship.
That was the worst cave death yet.
I think what's probably the worst part of cave deaths is not the physical dread that is going on, but like the mental test that you have to go through. Because being unable to breathe, being stuck in a corkscrew, and having to go through the mental fatigue of just like slowly dying must just be excruciating.
I think the death part's probably worst, Alex.
Adam, if you ever decide that you want to get into caving, I'm not going to let you.
Hermit Cave Incident.
Hermit
It was
Cave
April
incident.
5th, 1999.
It was April 5th, 1999.
Robert Kennedy from Oklahoma set out on what was supposed to be a normal overnight camping trip near Hermit Cave. He was accompanied by 2 others, his stepbrother Richard and their mutual friend Ben. During the night, they gathered around a campfire and discussed the nearby cave, sharing legends and stories about its mysterious reputation. The next morning,
stepbro gets
as they were
stuck, bro,
packing up to
I
head
can't
home,
watch
their
this.
curiosity about the cave got the better of them. The cave was largely
course it
unmapped,
did.
adding an air of
This is
intrigue.
literally
So
us.
Robert proposed a quick exploration. Ben, however, had to leave early for work, so he headed back
It's
home,
always one
leaving
guy
Robert and Richard
that
to
leaves.
decide for themselves. Robert and Richard entered the cave through its relatively large main entrance without...
It's weird. Like, it was cool when there was 3 guys. Now it's weird if 2 guys are going to the cave, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Like, they should just wait to do it together, because if they're all together, there's more people that could help if stuff goes wrong. Like, if there's just 2 guys, what if they both get injured? Then they're both, like, gonna get stuck.
And if it's just 2 guys, well, like 3 guys helps with like the sexual tension. So. You know what
Sorry,
I'm
I think
saying?
you cut out there.
Sorry.
You know what I'm talking
We're just
about?
going to move on.
difficulty. Inside, Robert spotted one of the rumored side passages they had been talking about and decided to explore it. The narrow passage was too tight for more than one person, so Richard decided to wait outside the cave. Robert promised not to go too deep and assured Richard he'd be back soon. As Robert crawled forward, he encountered a section of the cave that was about 100...
I'll be back in a jiffy! Like, what?
How does he expect to get out either? You can't turn around. You can't crawl backwards and up. You can't go like vertically backwards.
Feel
I'm
so
just
bad for
crawling
these
into
people.
Devil's Grundle. I'll be back real quick.
Like, what do they think, though?
Yeah, what are they expecting to find? Like, do they think there's burning treasure down there? Are they Jack Sparrow?
They think there is a freaking cave troll at the end of this with like a barrel of gold coins just waiting to be taken.
Oh, you found me.
Like,
yeah, take my
best
gold
case
coins.
scenario for these people. The best case scenario is they go down this hole, then they come back up. Like, that's it. Like, that's the best case scenario.
Nobody has ever gotten this far in Devil's Butthole before. You must have my treasure, please.
You have unlocked the secrets of the universe.
Oh, you must be a hero.
50 feet long and full of tight curves, making progress challenging. The real trouble began when he reached a particular point called the Keyhole Formation. This section was especially dangerous because it was impossible to exit legs first once passed.
Awesome.
Unaware of
Sick,
this,
dude.
Robert continued forward. But when the passage narrowed even further, he decided it was time to turn back. Returning to the Keyhole Formation, Robert realized something terrible. He couldn't pass through it feet first. His only option was
Idiot.
to move forward through the even tighter crevice, hoping
my
the cave would
gosh.
widen enough beyond it for him to turn
He has to turn around.
What he didn't know was that the crevice sloped
Can't,
downward
it's too
at a
fat.
30-degree
Skinny.
angle. Exhausted, Robert squeezed through the space, exhaling
Bless you.
all the air from his lungs just to fit. After several
this guy,
pushes,
too.
he reached a horrifying realization. He was stuck. Gravity was working against him, and every attempt to move only worsened his situation. Desperate, Robert began yelling for help, but Richard, waiting outside the cave, couldn't hear him. Worried after some time, Richard ventured into the cave by himself, though he had no flashlight because Robert had taken the only one. Crawling in complete
brought one
darkness,
flashlight!
Richard called out for Robert, who immediately yelled back, letting him know he was trapped and struggling to breathe. Realizing he couldn't reach his stepbrother in the pitch black, Richard left the cave to call for help, and about an hour later, a team of 10 rescuers arrived and began assessing the situation. The primary problem was Robert's location. He was trapped in an extremely deep area, approximately 150 feet from the
crazy.
This meant that drilling a shaft from above wasn't an option, so the only way to reach him was through the inside of the
They're gonna
cave.
break that
The
keyhole
rescuers
thing.
themselves began experiencing breathing difficulties due to the tight space, so they installed a ventilation system to pump warm air into the passages. Only one rescuer could work at a time due to the cave's tightness, and armed with manual tools, they began trying to widen the keyhole formation.
There we
However,
go.
the lack of space severely limited their maneuverability.
Dude, that's so scary for these rescuers because any rock formation that you mess up like could bring down the entire thing. This is a high
You
risk
have
job.
to
This is
be,
insane.
yeah, some type of like just a little bit crazy to be a cave rescuer person, because I hope that they get paid a lot of money, because they're not doing this because they love it. They are risking their lives daily to save people from caves.
I think they love it a little bit. I mean, you gotta love it if you do something like this.
Probably.
Time was running out. Robert's breathing became more difficult, and he eventually stopped cooperating, making faint gurgling sounds, a sign of potential suffocation. After hours of effort, the rescuers managed to excavate through the keyhole formation and reach Robert's feet. Though unconscious, they felt a faint pulse, which gave them enough hope to try to get him out as quickly as possible. They immediately tried to pull him free, but unfortunately, the attempt failed. A pulley system was considered, but the cave's limestone and gypsum walls were too fragile to support the tension. With no other options, they continued digging around his body, which took an additional hour. When they finally freed Robert, they rushed him outside, where paramedics were waiting. Tragically, it was too late. After 5 hours of relentless rescue operations, Robert Kennedy was pronounced dead. Black Cave tragedy.
Wait, 5 hours doesn't seem that long, though. Like, he died in just 5 hours?
People die in 30 seconds when they're underwater and they can't breathe.
He's not underwater, you dummy.
Yeah, but it's the restriction of air. That's what killed him. He can't breathe.
Guys, let's stop bickering and let's talk about today's sponsor, BeckBroJack.co. Links in the description down below for the best plushies, shirts, hoodies in the entire game. Let's get back to the video.
That's insane.
Pronounced dead. Black Cave tragedy. In April 1995, Thomas Edward Benning decided to visit Black Cave in Arizona. Having explored the cave before, he felt confident that this would be a relatively...
Probably because it's black inside.
But isn't every cave?
Yeah, yeah. This might have been the first cave ever to get discovered.
Maybe there's like black limestone in there.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Safe trip. He entered the cave alone, equipped only with an electric miner's lamp and no helmet. The first part of the cave was familiar to him, and he navigated it without any issues. However, at one point, he noticed a secret side passage that caught his attention. Drawn by curiosity, Thomas strayed from the main route he usually took and began exploring the darker, narrower passage. After venturing deeper into the unfamiliar passage for some time, Thomas decided it was time to turn back. But to his growing...
For me, if I go caving, walking... totally cool. The second you put me on my knees, I'm turning around. I'm getting out of there.
No, no, you ain't. No, you ain't.
Not a gosh dang second. You ain't. I'm crawling around in a cave. No way.
You're a little creepy crawler.
No way I'm crawling.
I think that there should be a general rule among everybody on planet Earth that if you are over 6 feet and 200 pounds, you should be banned from caving. Nobody should let you go inside of a cave if you're that big.
Alex's knees are meant to be stationary.
Concern. He realized that an hour had passed and he was completely lost. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't retrace his steps to the familiar route. As panic began to set in, his situation worsened. His lamp started to flicker and eventually went out, leaving him in total darkness, miles underground. With no source of light, Thomas turned to his last resort.
Miles?
Nobody leave a like on today's video. I do not want to do this.
A faint glow that barely illuminated the rocks around him. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He continued forward, using one match after another, but the matches burned out quickly, and soon he ran out entirely, leaving him once again surrounded by absolute darkness. Despite the circumstances, Thomas refused to give up. He devised a plan to leave behind small, useless items as markers to avoid circling back to the same spots. Starving, dehydrated, and utterly exhausted, he pressed on until he encountered the fissure, a narrow crack in the rock barely 4 feet deep. Believing this might be his only chance to reconnect with the familiar route or find a larger opening, he decided to enter it feet first. As he lowered himself into the gap, his hips dropped below the narrowest point, and he suddenly realized his mistake. He was completely wedged. His hips were firmly stuck between the rock walls, rendering him immobile. Using every last ounce of his strength, Thomas tried to lift himself back up, but it was no use. He was now trapped, alone, in the dark, with no one able to hear him. Days passed, and Thomas remained in the same position, growing weaker with each passing moment.
When did they find
Back home, his wife grew increasingly worried when he failed to return. She contacted the police, who began an extensive search of the caves in the area. Unfortunately, Thomas hadn't told anyone.
He didn't tell anyone. He didn't tell anyone!
So you're telling me that this guy, he said, bye, sweetheart, I'm gonna go into a cave now. Didn't say which cave, didn't say where he was going, and also, too, what's up with the wife? They said days passed, not just one day, not just 6 hours, days, multiple days passed, and then she called for help? Why didn't she do it the first day?
This is one of those I don't feel as bad because I feel like this guy's being dumb.
Guys, this is totally preventable. Do not go into cave. Easy.
Which cave he planned to visit, leaving rescuers to search blindly. Miraculously, rescuers eventually spotted his car parked near Black Cave. A rescue team entered the cave, carefully exploring all the mapped sections. They found some of Thomas's belongings, including his glasses and shirt, but they missed the secret side passage he had mentioned.
Is he naked?
Wait, why?
Thomas was still alive at this point, though his condition was rapidly deteriorating. Days passed, and with no further progress, authorities unfortunately called off the search. Thomas was officially declared missing. Refusing to give up, his wife continued pleading with authorities to resume the search.
She didn't go in the cave,
She distributed
right?
flyers around the city and reached out to anyone who might have information, but unfortunately, she wouldn't have known about her husband for a long time. It wasn't until December 1996, over a year and a half later, that three other cavers exploring Black Cave stumbled upon Thomas's remains in the dark, narrow passage where he had become trapped. Zacaton sinkhole.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna quit caving. I never started, but I officially quit for the rest of my life.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
Do you think Logan Paul would have filmed that if he found that?
Yes.
The last cave death is the Zacaton sinkhole incident.
On April 6, 1994, diving legend Shek Exley, the first person in the world to log over 100 cave dives, set out to break a new depth record. His goal was to dive through the Zacaton sinkhole in Mexico, one of the deepest water-filled sinkholes in the world, plunging over 1,000 feet. Shek's passion for deep diving began at a young age when he and his brother would compete to see how deep they could go. Tragically, during one such competition, his brother lost consciousness at around 50 feet and drowned. Despite this,
Okay,
that should be the end. That's when you give it all up. My brother's dead. I'm never doing this again. Are you serious?
His brother died at 50 feet, so he was like, I can do 1,000. Watch this, bro.
I guess, I mean, I can see where he's coming from. Maybe part of him was like, you know, we love this thing, so he felt close to his brother every single time that he would dive into these caves. So maybe that's it. But it seems like it led to his ultimate demise.
His brother died from 50 feet.
After, yeah, it seems like he dove into the Zacaton sinkhole, better known as Satan's toilet.
You're bringing up Satan a lot.
Well, yeah, these are not godly creations, Adam. These are the pits of hell.
Shek pursued his love for diving, becoming an expert. For context, the average diver is advised not to descend deeper than 150 feet, with 300 feet considered the absolute limit for experienced divers. Accompanied by fellow diver Jim Bowden, Shek meticulously prepared for the record-breaking dive. The event drew TV reporters who wanted to witness this extraordinary feat. As the two divers descended into the Zacaton sinkhole, they wished each other luck. Although diving together, their dives would be independent. Exley had trained for this attempt, pushing his limits in previous dives. During one preparation dive at Bushman's Hole in South Africa, however, something weird happened. He reached an astonishing depth of 863 feet, but experienced alarming symptoms. He began hallucinating, and his body trembled uncontrollably, which are classic signs of high-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS. HPNS typically manifests at depths beyond 500 feet, and is believed to result from the compression of cell membranes in the central nervous system. The condition can cause confusion, tremors, and even hallucinations, making it incredibly dangerous for divers at those depths. To mitigate these risks, Shek and Bowden planned to descend slowly, carefully switching tanks as they reached new depths. For the first stretch of their dive, everything went smoothly. However, problems began to arise at around 800 feet. Bowden noticed slight trembling in his hands, an early warning sign of HPNS.
That's when you go right back up, right?
Yeah, I feel like as soon as you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable and sick, that's when you just say, hey, it's not worth it. I like living. Let's just go back up and then we'll try again later.
And it's not like they can just ascend. I'm pretty sure you have to go through each like every 100 feet, you have to equalize yourself with the pressure. And then you can go to 700, then 600, then 500. So it's not like once they start freaking out, they can just go all the way back to the top. It takes hours to get down here. Cave expert.
900 feet, Bowden encountered another issue. His air supply was running critically low. His tank pressure had dropped to 1,080 psi, far below the expected 1,800 psi needed to ensure a safe ascent. Keep in mind that decompression, depending on how deep the divers go, can take up to hours, which meant that Bowden was now...
The thing is, this is different than a regular dive because bro has thousands of people watching him. This isn't one where like, you know, he has to do it. It's not like he's like, ah, dang, I didn't get it today. Let's try again tomorrow. There's so much pressure on his shoulders to make this dive happen. He's on live television. He's got to do it.
What if he goes down like 800 feet, 900 feet, and he pops up and he's like, I did 1,000. Who's going to tell him? Like, for real.
Fact check that.
Like, if his life is on the line, who's going to actually fact check him? Who's down there with him?
That would be kind of funny if he went down like 50 feet so people couldn't see him and then he just hung out for a few hours and then came back up like, I did it.
Exactly. Nobody would actually care. They'd be like, oh my God, he did it.
He's doing this for himself, and that's why it's not gonna go well.
Life or death situation. Realizing the danger, Bowden began his ascent immediately, hoping he could make it back to the surface in time. Exley, however, was in even greater trouble. At around 880 feet, his vision blurred, and his body began trembling uncontrollably. HPNS symptoms, combined with nitrogen narcosis, which is a condition akin to being drunk caused by high-pressure nitrogen, began impairing his ability to think clearly. To steady himself, Exley wrapped his descent line around his arms, but his symptoms worsened, causing him to breathe more rapidly and deplete his air supply at an alarming rate. In a desperate move, he switched tanks, but at such depths, this was not ideal. Disoriented and overwhelmed by his symptoms, Exley became unable to think straight or move. Bowden, ascending cautiously, noticed Exley's descent line with unused tanks still attached. While concerned, he assumed Exley might have successfully reached the sinkhole's bottom and was making his way back up slowly. However, on the surface, the support team grew suspicious. They observed bubbles rising to the surface, but only from one diver, Bowden. A support diver, alarmed, wrote on an underwater slate, "Where's Shek?" She decided to descend to 250 feet to investigate.
That's nowhere
At
close.
280 feet, she spotted something chilling, two small white squares hanging from Exley's descent line. Upon closer inspection, she realized they were pages from Exley's diving profile, tools he had used to meticulously plan his dive. The realization was devastating. Shek was stuck somewhere deep below. Nearly 10 hours after their initial descent, Bowden miraculously surfaced, surviving his own life-threatening dive. Exley, however, a hero that had previously saved numerous other divers, remained in the depths of the Zacaton sinkhole. 3 days later, the recovery team pulled his descent line to the surface, bringing Exley's lifeless body with it. Jim Bowden reached an extraordinary depth of 915 feet during the dive, setting a world record for open-circuit scuba diving. In November 2005, 14-year-old Joseph Lister, along with 10 classmates, including his friends Charlie and Amy from his school, his math teacher, and a 17-year-old caver volunteer who knew the cave system well, decided to explore the Nidderdale Caves in North Yorkshire, England. The cave system is famous for its 20 entrances, and the group chose to enter through Manchester Hole, a small opening in the ground that leads to a huge cave. They descended through a hole into a massive chamber, about the size of a football field, with a few inches of water on the
Wait, that's
floor
actually
and
huge.
a 50-foot high ceiling hung with stalactites. After
I would do that. That kind of sounds awesome.
I think I would too.
It seems like it was a school trip, though. That's kind of a crazy school trip to do. To go caving?
I mean,
that's insane.
That's what happens in Europe. They don't have those regulations.
Well, that also seems pretty safe too, if they're going into such a massive cave, but it looks like they're about to go down deeper into maybe a lesser explored section.
I would also want my helper to be older than 17, like at least be 20 plus.
Right, you want them to have experience.
Yeah, 17. They're not even, like, I don't know how you call yourself an
At least
experienced
18.
cave diver.
At least 18.
Yeah, I want you to be able to buy a vape if you're taking me into a cave.
Exactly. That's strike number 1 for me.
Passing through, they entered a tunnel and climbed down a muddy path into a second, smaller chamber that still held all 11 students and had shallow water. The tunnel then narrowed sharply, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees for 40 feet through twisted passages.
That's where I would turn around.
At the bottom, a muddy stream soaked their clothes, but led to a small chamber where they could stand again. The math teacher was the last to follow the group. When he reached the small chamber, the guide became very worried because the water level was much higher than usual, something he had never seen before. Even though it was cold and windy outside, there was no forecast of rain.
I was just about to say something. If ever you are in a cave, right? Because caving, I know a lot of people go inside caves. You know, most of the time, it's okay to go inside of a cave, especially a frequented cave, especially if you have an expert. But if you ever see water in a cave, you gotta be super careful because they can fill up extremely quickly with flood water. And then if you get stuck in there, you're gonna be trapped for such a long time, or you could possibly die.
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst way to go, is like drowning in a cave.
Yeah.
Rather than just getting stuck.
Exactly, yeah, because you know your fate before it's even happening. Like, you could see the water slowly filling up.
Yeah, exactly. And you're trying to crawl as fast as you can, and then you probably have some buddies behind you, and then you can hear them gargling on water as you're still trying to go, and oh my god.
That's one of my
I don't
fears.
even want to
Math
think about
teacher,
it.
yeah, your math teacher is screaming out like, what's the square root of 2? And you're like, I don't know, man. And then you die.
And then you learn that you failed your last exam.
Yeah, terrible.
Even though it was cold and windy outside, there was no forecast of rain. Everyone was standing in freezing water. Their boots were filled with water, and there was hardly any space to move. To make matters worse, the water kept rising, soon reaching above the knees of some students. The guide, confused by the sudden flooding, knew they had to get out quickly.
There we go.
So they decided to retreat. The math teacher went first, followed by the students, one by one, taking the small passage back to the previous chamber.
Someone's gonna get stuck.
At one point, the teacher and 9 of the students were inside the tunnel when a sudden surge of cold water flooded the chamber. The guide, along with Amy and Joseph,
No!
were the last
Oh
to
my
exit the
God.
chamber and enter the tunnel. The tunnel was crowded with students struggling against the rising
Oh
water.
my gosh.
Realizing the
Way.
danger, the guide, Amy, and Joseph went back to the previous chamber to catch their breath.
No.
But the water kept rising,
No, no,
and they
no,
were
no,
nearly
no, no, no,
submerged.
no, no, no,
Taking
no,
a
no.
deep breath, they re-entered the tunnel. This time,
No.
the tunnel was clear enough for them to move. The guide led the way, with Amy and Joseph following closely.
No, there's only
However,
two.
In the
Oh my
previous
God.
chamber, the guide pushed Amy out to safety, but Joseph never made it out.
No!
The water continued to rise, even in the chamber. The guide tried to go back for Joseph, but the math teacher insisted on taking the other 10 students to
my
safety.
God.
Tragically, Joseph drowned in the narrow tunnel, where there was
Oh. That's insane. And they're still not out of the cave yet, by the way. There's still more cave to get out of.
To be honest, though, it could have been way worse. I know, like, it sucks that this kid died, but if 9 of them still got out in this instance, I think it's pretty good.
Imagine if that happened like halfway through, then everybody that was behind him would have been done.
Yeah, because he was basically plugging it up.
Yeah, obviously it's not the best case scenario, but it could have been worse. Alex, right?
Yeah, only one person got trapped in Manchester's hole.
That scene from earlier when the water's filling up, like that's a nightmare. Imagine being on like a submarine or a Titanic, and like you see the water level rising, and you have to take your last breath at the top.
That part is insane. The fact that they were able to hold their breath and then get through a tiny little cave section and then make it to the next air pocket is incredible.
God, this is sad. Why do we keep watching these, man? Stop liking these videos.
no air. After the incident, the group went to the surface to alert emergency personnel, and they emerged under a blue sky with strong winds, but not a single drop of rain. It was later revealed
happened?
that strong winds had blown water out of the nearby Scar House Reservoir that day. Thousands of gallons of water were forced into the river below, causing it to rise 4 feet in just 1 hour. This surge of water drained directly into the cave system. Normally, water slowly trickles through and seeps into the groundwater, but that day, the huge volume overwhelmed the cave's ability to drain, triggering flash flooding throughout the system in just a few minutes.
That is so unlucky.
Cave rescuers arrived within 20 minutes after being called. By then, the water had already receded to below their knees. They found the lifeless body of Joseph Lister in the narrow tunnel before the final chamber. Neil Moss incident.
Wow.
It was
That's gotta be the worst job ever. Being like a cave rescuer, because
Yeah.
I'm sure half of the incidents, like, you're going to find what is just a corpse at that point. And it must be so sad.
I really hope that one day this YouTuber makes videos where they are successful saves, where like it's a close call, but there's still hope, and like it's like the most extraordinary cave saves of all time, not deaths.
That would be nice to watch. Guys, please comment down below if you guys want to see that instead of this. Oh my God. And that was only the first one, Jack. There's 2 more. Right
Next
now,
up, we
got the Neil Moss incident.
Sunday, March 22nd, 1959, when 20-year-old Oxford philosophy student Oscar Neil Moss, along with
Big brain.
7 other people, 4 of whom were part of the British Caving Association,
All right.
decided to visit Peak Cavern in the village of Castleton,
Professionals.
Derbyshire.
That looks
the
pretty
cave
cool.
system was well known.
Yeah.
However, 2 weeks earlier, the same 4 BCA explorers had discovered a new fissure in a side chamber that was 1,000
Oh, here
feet
we
deep.
go.
The 8 explorers
Here we
entered
go.
the cave system in the afternoon. They were equipped with ropes, lamps, helmets, and other necessary caving materials. Upon entering, they discovered the Mucky Ducks section, a wet squeeze tunnel that was frequently
Who is
flooded after
naming
rain.
these?
This led them
The
to the
Mucky
boulder
Ducks.
passage, an easier section where they could stand upright while descending and maneuver around various obstructions. Approximately
That's a good spot.
493
Yeah.
feet into the passage, a 10-feet climb on the north wall of the upper gallery awaited them. High above the steep
Okay.
Doesn't this kind of look like the inside of like a human intestine?
It does, yeah. That is Satan's intestinal butthole right there.
Wait, I don't.
That's a weird way to put it.
I don't know about all that.
It's not heavenly, I'll tell you that. That is the devil's track right there. I'm just telling you, the turds coming out of that intestinal tract, they are big.
That went a different direction than I was expecting. All right, I'll press play now.
Muddy slopes was Pickering Passage, a long, narrow crawl space where you had to stretch your whole body to move through. It concluded with an awkward bend and a muddy sump.
What?
Above the
No.
eye hole, just
Nope.
large enough to accommodate a
gosh.
human body, laid the next challenge. It led to
Nope.
a thigh-deep, muddy pool that connected to
Nope.
the stalagmite chamber, a vast,
Nope.
beautiful part of the cave
That's
filled
actually
with
pretty cool
stalagmites
if you
with
made
a
it there.
ceiling high enough for a person to stand
Nope.
upright. Despite their fatigue, they approached the newly discovered
Like
fissure.
that's where I would stop. Like right there.
No. 7 steps ago is when you should have stopped, Adam. You don't get through all of that. You would go through the eye hole? Bro, this isn't like climbing a mountain where you get to the top and it's like, wow, look at this amazing view. The view is the same the entire way through, bro. You're looking at walls of rocks, bro. You're seeing rocks everywhere.
No, but that area, look, it's bigger than all the other areas combined. You could actually stand up in it. That would be so sick. Imagine you travel that far down just to see this one beautiful rock. Alex with me.
I'm with Adam.
Yeah,
and also, I'm trying to think of like an invention that can help people not get stuck. What do you guys think of like a rock?
That calorie deficit.
A caving suit, right?
Oh.
That is like 3 or 4 inches like thick. So you're caving with this suit on, and then if you ever get stuck, there's a button.
What if you can't reach the
that
button?
then shrinks the suit.
Oh.
This way you can get through. But it's like, okay, if I can't get through with my suit on, I'm not going through. Like, that's your rule of thumb. What do you guys think of that?
I think that I have common sense and I will never be in a cave, so I will never need that invention.
Alec, I like
can't
that.
believe
Alec,
I'm
I like
that
that.
smart.
And I'm going to steal that. And I'm not giving you any percentage. And I'm going to sue you.
Oh, okay.
They're about to come out of the butthole right now.
All right, let's see.
Fissure in the
Jack.
ground. The shaft measured around 3.2 feet by 2.3
See, it doesn't even go anywhere
None had
fun. Like,
ventured
that's where I
all the
would
way down
stop.
there, but it was estimated to be at least 40 feet deep. To be safe, they decided to deploy a 250 feet climbing
To be
ladder.
safe.
And Neil volunteered to
totally
go down.
safe, totally
He started to
safe.
descend around 3:30 p.m., pushing the ladder before continuing. He went down 12 feet when he met his first challenge, the corkscrew twist. He succeeded in pushing himself to a
Satan's
10-foot
corkscrew
long,
twist.
slightly inclined passageway, and then crawled through it, pushing the ladder as he went.
Oh my
Afterwards, he
gosh.
came face to face with a vertical passageway 18 feet deep, a section none had ventured into before. Throughout his descent, he maintained constant communication with his team above. Excited, Moss dropped further down the tunnel, but
I'm okay,
unfortunately,
still in
he
the
met a boulder
butthole.
there. He knew he couldn't continue descending, so he decided to climb back up. Unfortunately, Moss found himself unable to lift his feet
No.
sufficiently to ascend the ladder.
That's like the worst place to get stuck, at the very bottom.
How does that happen? How do you put your feet in a spot where you can't get them out, bro? That had to be this big. That had to be this big.
Have you ever seen that movie where the guy like slipped and then he got his arm stuck for 72 hours?
27 hours. I watch it once a year. Yeah, but bro, it would not happen right there. He was able to get his foot through, and then now he's trapped.
Yeah, what if he hit a rock and it did a little rock slide and then his foot is stuck now?
Oh, that's the worst spot to be stuck.
I know, it's awful.
See, if he had my patented shoe on, he would be able to shrink his shoe and get it out.
I think everybody should be like butt naked, just lathered up in baby oil. That's the only way you're slithering through these sections.
Okay, maybe not the naked part, but I do think that the oil part could be good actually for slipping out of these scenarios.
Yes.
Maybe everyone who went to Diddy parties went caving after, and they were all prepping. What do you think? All right,
I'm
let's
definitely
keep going.
suing you. Oh, I'm building up a case.
became trapped in an elliptical crevice only 18 inches wide. He called out for
That's huge.
assistance, and despite efforts to lift him by pulling on the ladder, it became jammed between the cave surface and his body. Ropes were lowered to help him, but every time they tried to pull him up, they either snapped or got cut by the sharp edge of the rock. His body ended up blocking air from getting into the shaft, so he needed to be rescued
What?
immediately before he ran out of oxygen.
His head is
Some
blocking
of the cavers
oxygen.
left to seek more help. Within a few
we
hours,
pause?
hundreds of volunteers from across
So hold on, I just gotta get this through my head. So like, best case scenario, right? This guy, he goes all the way down through Devil's Corkscrew, all the way through the Satan intestinal cage, and then he goes down into the rectum area of the cave. What's the best case scenario here? Well, what is he gonna find down there that he hasn't seen on the way down?
Diamonds, Jack, diamonds. He's trying to get down to Y9.
Okay, this is
Y9.
this is not Minecraft. This is not Minecraft.
I don't think he's a diamond digger, Alec. I don't think he's one of those. I think that he's just down there for fun,
think
right?
He's
he's
doing
like-
it for the thrill.
Yeah,
He's doing it
it's
for the thrill. Jack.
He's trying to
You don't-
touch his toe.
High risk, no reward. High risk, no reward. There's no reward.
He gets back up to the top. He goes to the bar's nearby. All of his boys are surrounding him, like hyping him up. A girl comes over. He's like, dude, all my guys, they only went 5,000 feet. I went 5,001.
I twisted my way through the rectum, baby.
And if he finds like a cool room there, then he's got his own like secret room that nobody else can go to.
He can name it too.
Okay, hold on. Hear me out. Alec, you had your invention. I have my invention, right? Cave camera, right? You put a camera on the end of a rope and you just lower it down so you can see what you're getting into, and then you don't have to worry about getting stuck.
But that ruins the thrill. That ruins the whole point of the thrill.
The thrill is killing people, Alec. We've watched 5 videos. Each of them has 5 cave deaths. That's 25 cave deaths that we've witnessed.
Well, Jack, to your point, this was in I think this was in like 1956. So I don't think they had that kind of invention at that point.
True.
True.
This is only for
He
future
was just-
incidents.
He was just trying to find a nice circular round room to play patty cake with the boys,
Okay.
where no one else
Alec?
would ever disrupt him. No one is
We're
ever
moving
gonna
on,
find you
Alec.
down there.
We're moving on.
Just saying, it's a good spot.
Within a few hours, hundreds of volunteers from across England, along with the Royal Air Force, police, and even the Navy, joined the rescue effort.
What is the Air Force going to do?
After
too many
Moss
people.
Underground territory.
The rescuers encountered another obstacle. By this time, the air in the shaft had become polluted by carbon dioxide. Moss became disoriented because of it, and he began behaving irrationally. Witnesses said that he wasn't helping at all, that he didn't seem to care about how serious the situation was, and that he even told the rescuers to take a break to get something to eat. Experienced cavers were sent down the shaft to rescue Moss, but one by one, they were forced back by the toxic air. 3 of the volunteers even lost consciousness. Finally, the 4th volunteer, Ron Peters, managed to secure a rope around Moss's chest and began to pull. However, he soon realized that this only worsened Moss's breathing difficulties. The Royal Air Force brought oxygen tanks to ventilate the shaft, and although the quality of air was marginally improved, it proved to be insufficient. The next morning, 18-year-old June Bailey arrived and suggested breaking Neil's collarbone to help rescue him. However, the toxic air stopped all their efforts, and they had to turn back. By Monday afternoon, roughly 24 hours after Moss entered the cave, he was still breathing, but it started to rain, and the entire cave was evacuated as a precaution. When it stopped, the rescuers went back to the shaft accompanied by a Royal Air Force doctor. They did not hear a sound. Moss was not breathing, and he was declared dead on Tuesday, March 24th, 1959. Throughout the ordeal, Moss's father, Eric Moss, stayed at the entrance and asked that his son's body remain where it was to avoid risking further injury or loss of life during the rescue. The shaft was sealed with rocks from the stalagmite chamber. That chamber, which held the shaft, later became known as the Moss Chamber, his final resting place. The Manatee Springs Cave dive.
Wow.
Dang.
So what you're telling me is that people probably still go there to this day because they renamed it, right? So they didn't shut it down. People still are able to get there, and then they find his grave.
Yeah, it's like a memorial center.
Yeah, pretty much.
Respect.
Oh, gosh, man.
Imagine, like, farting in a cave, and then that doesn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, he ran out of air. Literally.
Is that what the toxic gas was, you think?
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
the air, he couldn't get air down there.
I would fart as a joke, and then it might get way too serious, and then everyone's like, I can't breathe. And then it's your fault because you farted.
Your own farts and your own exhausts, your own CO2. Yeah, it's a pretty bad way to go out.
Guess the moral of the story is don't tickle devil's butthole.
Yeah, just steer clear, guys. If you see a cave, turn around, go home, watch Netflix.
The Manatee Springs Cave diving tragedy. On March 14th, 2022, a couple of friends, William and Harry, and their respective fathers, George and Jack, decided to visit the Manatee Springs State Park in Florida to do some cave diving. At Manatee Springs State Park, divers need to have full cave diving certification and must dive with a partner who has previous diving experience at Manatee in order to access the cave area. All 4 divers had only the intro to cave diving certification, not the full one. The Manatee Springs system is known for its 4 entry points. Manatee Springs, mainly for open water divers, Catfish Hotel, Sue's Sink, and Freedman's Sink. The cave tunnels below these points extend for thousands of feet, but only Freedman's Sink and Catfish Hotel have an entrance pool for cave divers. The system is called a siphon because water flows like a river from a distant entry point and naturally comes out at Manatee Springs. Due to this flow, cave divers typically enter at one point and exit downstream at another. This type of dive, known as a traverse, is more challenging because divers must know 2 pathways instead of just 1. Entering a siphon and a traverse system was only allowed for full certified cave divers.
If you go the wrong way,
they decided to.
If you go the wrong way, you're going to be basically going the wrong way for thousands of feet, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you got to swim upstream. You have to swim against the current.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think that when you're down there, you would be able to feel the current, but I have a weird feeling because they're only intro cave divers, they're not going to know what they're doing. And then they're going to get all flustered down there. They're going to be like, what's going on? What's going on? And then they go the wrong way, and then it's too late.
Yeah, I think what could happen too is because they're going against the current, they might not be good enough swimmers to get to the end before they run out of oxygen. So they might get like 70% there and then run out of oxygen, and then they're just cooked.
So you think that they're actually trying to go through the other cave system on purpose?
I think
the wrong way? Oh god.
Yeah, they already
I
mean, they broke one rule. Why not break another?
Regardless, they decided to enter the system at Freedman's Sink and planned to exit at Catfish Hotel. They started their dive at 11:17 a.m. Each diver equipped with 2 air tanks, both filled to 3,800 psi. Since the tunnels were about 100 feet deep, roughly 4 atmospheres of pressure, the air was compressed to 1/4 of its original volume and consumed at 4 times the surface rate. They all carried both primary and backup light sources, as well as dive computers to track their depth, heart rate, movement, and time. Additionally, William and Harry had a GoPro in their head to document the entire dive.
So this is
William
recent.
and Harry took the lead, with their dads following closely behind. The gentle pull of the water from Friedman's sink helped them cover the 1,700 feet distance to Catfish Hotel.
So far, so
After
good.
the first 900 feet, they came to an exit line at Sue's sink. A rope tied to a rock marked the spot, and light from the surface was seeping into the tunnel. This exit was meant for emergencies only, because it wasn't set up for divers, but for campers. Their planned exit, Catfish Hotel, was 700 feet away. They kept diving and eventually reached the end of the route near Manatee Springs, but they couldn't see the exit line to Catfish Hotel. Confused, they started searching for any light coming from above, but found nothing. Fathers and sons teamed up and decided to return by following the line. At that moment, George had 3,000 psi of air remaining, which was enough to exit safely. However, the return trip turned out to be more difficult than expected.
Yeah, because
they were moving against the current, so their air consumption increased rapidly as their breathing rate went up. Finally, George spotted the exit at Sue's sink and noticed light leaking from the surface. George and his son William emerged from the system at 12 p.m. However, their friends didn't make it out. Something had gone wrong. William wanted to dive back down to find Harry and Jack, but George insisted on calling 911 instead. Harry and Jack had apparently missed the exit at Sue's sink. Their lighting equipment washed out the natural light leaking from the surface, and boulders further blocked it, so they didn't see the exit. They continued diving desperately for another 20 minutes, searching for any exit. Finally, Harry spotted the light at Friedman's sink. Rushing ahead along the guideline, he looked back to see his dad's camera light following him. Harry managed to exit the system at 12:20 p.m. with one tank completely empty and the other below 1,500 psi. But his father Jack did not emerge. William and George met up with Harry at Friedman's sink, and they talked about why they had missed the exit at Catfish Hotel. They later realized there was no upline leading to Catfish Hotel. Deep inside the cave, they could see light from the surface, but it was partly blocked by a 10-foot deep passage arranged in a double L shape, a detail they wouldn't have known without prior experience. In fact, many divers enter through Catfish Hotel and exit at Friedman's sink because it's easier, even though they have to dive against the current. Cave rescuers arrived around 12:50 p.m. and found Jack's lifeless body just 100 feet from the exit at Friedman's sink.
Of course, it was Jack that died.